Primal Depths by Edwina Longbottom. Chapter 1. Beneath the Surface. The North Sea stretched endlessly, its surface a restless expanse of gray under an oppressive sky. Waves slapped against the steel legs of the Atlas rig, a colossal offshore drilling platform planted defiantly in the middle of nature's fury. Towering waves and bitter winds were routine here, and the crew of the Atlas took pride in enduring what others couldn't. From the control room perched high above the tumultuous waters, rig manager Bill Hargrove watched the storm roll in. Bill was a veteran of the oil fields, his face weathered like the sea itself, his graying beard a testament to decades of battles against man and nature. But tonight, something gnawed at him, an unease he couldn't shake. Pressures climbing again, came the voice of Logan Fisk, the lead driller, through the intercom. Logan, a wiry man with sharp eyes, had spent the past week monitoring the rig's progress as they drilled deeper than ever before. The promise of untapped reserves had the corporate execs salivating, and the Atlas crew was under relentless pressure to deliver. Bill leaned into the console, his brow furrowing as he scanned the readings. The drill bit had reached unprecedented depths, pushing past layers of rock untouched for millennia. The data coming back was strange: pressure spikes, erratic temperatures, and seismic tremors. "Anything we need to worry about?" Bill asked, though he already knew the answer. "Probably just a gas pocket," Logan replied, his voice steady but strained. "These old formations are unpredictable. We're keeping an eye on it." Bill nodded, though it did little to ease his unease. He tapped the intercom button again. "Dr. Eliza Kane, can you come up here?" Eliza was the rig's environmental geologist, a voice of caution amid the relentless push for profit. She had argued against drilling this deep, citing unknown risks and environmental impact. The company had ignored her concerns, but Bill had learned to trust her instincts. Minutes later, Eliza appeared, her curly hair frizzed from the humidity, her glasses fogged. She carried a tablet loaded with geological data. "I'm guessing you've seen the spikes," she said without preamble. "What do you make of it?" Bill asked. Eliza hesitated, her fingers dancing over the tablet. "The formations down there are unusual. I've been studying the seismic patterns, and there's something beneath the drill site. A void, maybe, or a cavern. It's hard to tell." Bill frowned. "And you didn't mention this before?" "I did," she said sharply. "In my reports but you know how corporate works. They only see dollar signs." Before Bill could respond, a deep rumble reverberated through the rig. The lights flickered, and a low groan echoed up from the ocean floor. Every head on the rig turned toward the noise, their faces pale. "What the hell was that?" Logan's voice crackled over the intercom. Bill grabbed the radio. "Everyone stay calm. Could be a tremor." But Eliza shook her head, her expression grim. "That wasn't a tremor. That was something moving." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Bill opened his mouth to argue, to dismiss her claim as nerves, when the alarms blared. Red lights bathed the control room as warning sirens screamed. "Pressure spike! We're losing stability!" Logan yelled. Bill raced to the control panel, his heart pounding. The drill head had struck something that wasn't rock. A sudden, violent vibration coursed through the rig, knocking tools off shelves and sending crew members staggering. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant roar that rose from the depths, vibrating through the rig like a living thing. It wasn't the groan of machinery or the screech of steel. It was organic, primal. The crew froze, their fear palpable. Bill gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "What in God's name is down there?" Chapter 2, The Awakening. The roaring sound subsided, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. On the Atlas rig, every crew member held their breath, ears straining for any further disturbance. Bill Hargrove's hand hovered over the intercom switch, his mind racing for explanations. "Logan, report," Bill barked. "We've lost the drill bit," came the reply, his voice taut with disbelief. "She's gone, Bill. Something sheared it clean off." "Something?" Bill snapped. "What do you mean, something? Rocks don't shear steel." Eliza's eyes darted between the trembling seismic readouts on her tablet. "Bill," she whispered, "we need to stop drilling immediately." "You think?" He shot back, his nerves fraying. But before he could issue the order, the rig shuddered violently, a deep vibration that seemed to pulse up through its very bones. The room's monitors flickered, static and distortion rippling across the screens. "What's happening?" one of the junior engineers asked, panic edging his voice. From the observation deck, a sharp scream pierced the air. Bill turned to see one of the deckhands stumble into view, his face pale as a ghost. He pointed a shaking finger toward the ocean. There's something in the water," the man stammered. "It's huge." Bill and Eliza rushed out onto the deck, bracing themselves against the howling wind and lashing rain. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, turning the sea into a boiling cauldron of black waves. "Where?" Bill demanded, scanning the chaos. The deckhand could only gesture weakly toward the horizon, but Eliza saw it first. A dark, massive shadow moved just beneath the surface, its outline blurred by the churning water. It was impossibly large, too big for any marine animal known to science. "It's circling us," Eliza said, her voice trembling. "Bill, that's not a whale. It's not anything I've ever seen." A deep, resonant thud reverberated through the rig, as if something had struck its steel legs. The impact sent the entire platform swaying, causing several crew members to lose their footing. Another strike followed, harder this time, and a sickening creak echoed up from the supports. Inside the control room, Logan's voice came over the intercom again, now high-pitched with fear. "Bill, you need to see this. Camera 4, underwater feed." Bill and Eliza dashed back inside, dripping rainwater onto the floor. Logan had pulled up the feed from one of the rig's underwater cameras. The image was murky, distorted by sediment stirred up from the ocean floor. But through the haze, a shape emerged, long, sinuous, and bristling with movement. "What the hell am I looking at?" Bill demanded. "It's alive," Eliza murmured, her eyes wide, "and it's ancient." The creature drifted closer to the camera, its sheer scale becoming horrifyingly clear. Its body was armored with jagged, black, barnacle-encrusted scales that glistened in the faint light. Rows of needle-sharp teeth glinted in a gaping maw that seemed designed for one purpose: destruction. It wasn't a fish, nor any reptile they could identify. It was something far older, far deadlier. Then, with terrifying speed, the creature surged forward. The camera feed cut to black as the equipment was destroyed in an instant. "Evacuate the rig," Eliza urged, her voice breaking. "Now." Bill hesitated, torn between his duty to the crew and the inevitable fallout of abandoning the rig. "We don't even know what it is." "I don't care what it is," Eliza snapped. "It's hunting us." The intercom crackled again, but this time it wasn't Logan. It was Jenny, one of the deck operators. "Something's on the platform. I saw it come up the side." Her voice dissolved into static, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Bill grabbed a fire axe from the wall and bolted for the main deck. Eliza closed behind him. They emerged into the storm to find chaos. A gaping hole had been torn in the railing, and Jenny's hard hat floated in a growing pool of rainwater. There was no sign of her, or of the thing that had taken her. "Back inside now," Bill shouted, but the words were barely out of his mouth before the rig shook again, harder this time. A deafening screech filled the air as one of the steel support legs buckled under the force of an unseen blow. Eliza grabbed his arm. "Bill, if this thing keeps attacking, we're going down." "Not if I can help it," Bill growled, his resolve hardening. "Get everyone to the safe room. I'll buy us time." Before she could argue, another sound rose above the storm, a deep guttural growl that seemed to emanate from all directions. It was intelligent, calculating, and filled with rage, and it was coming for them. Chapter 3, The Last Line of Defense. The Atlas rig was now a fortress under siege. Rain lashed against the steel walls as the crew scrambled to prepare for whatever horror was circling them in the dark waters below. Inside the cramped safe room, tension thickened the air. A dozen oil-streaked faces stared at Bill Hargrove, each one searching for a glimmer of hope in their leader's eyes. "We're not sitting ducks," Bill said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "This thing wants to bring us down, it'll have to go through hell first." "What the hell are we supposed to do, Bill?" snapped Logan, pacing like a caged animal. "It's not like we've got torpedoes on this rig." "No," Bill admitted, "but we've got fire, we've got tools, and we've got grit. That's more than this thing expects." Logan scoffed, but Eliza stepped forward. "Bill's right," she said, her voice calm but firm. "If we panic, we're as good as dead. Let's focus on what we can control." Bill turned to the group. "Here's the plan. We need to defend the rig's vulnerable points, the legs, the drill site, and the main deck. If it keeps attacking those, we won't stay afloat long. We'll use what we've got to slow it down. He pointed to Jenny's assistant, Carter, a wiry kid barely out of his 20s. You and Eliza, get to the engine room and rig up the fire suppression system. If we can flood the lower deck with steam, it might force that thing back. On it, Carter said, though his hands trembled as he grabbed his gear. Logan, Bill continued, you're with me. We're going to rig some of the acetylene tanks as makeshift explosives. If it comes on deck again, we'll light it up. And what if that doesn't work? Logan asked. Then we pray it doesn't find a way inside, Bill said grimly. Fortifying the rig. The crew split up, each small team armed with makeshift weapons, wrenches, crowbars, and lengths of steel pipe. Eliza led Carter through the labyrinthine corridors of the rig, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. The storm outside created a constant cacophony of groaning metal and crashing waves, but beneath it all, she swore she could hear something else, a faint, wet, slithering sound, as if the creature was probing the rig for weaknesses. Stay close, Eliza said, glancing back at Carter, who nodded silently. In the engine room, they worked quickly. Carter opened the fire suppression controls, while Eliza rigged the steam valves. Her fingers trembled as she tightened a bolt, the eerie growl of the creature echoing faintly through the pipes. What do you think it is? Carter whispered. Something that should have stayed buried, Eliza replied, her voice tight. Let's hope it hates heat. Meanwhile, Bill and Logan hauled 2 acetylene tanks onto the main deck, straining against the wind and rain. The storm was a nightmare, but it also provided cover. Bill set one of the tanks near the edge of the deck, tying it down with a rope. Fuse ready? He asked. Logan lit the makeshift fuse, a frayed length of rope soaked in oil. Yeah, but this better work, Bill. If we blow the deck, we're done. We're done anyway if we don't try, Bill snapped. He turned back toward the safe room, but froze mid-step. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. Something massive breached the water, its dark, sinewy body glistening with rain. It slithered up one of the rig's legs, the steel groaning under its weight. It's here, Logan yelled, grabbing a wrench and swinging wildly as the creature's head rose into view. Its eyes gleamed like molten gold, fixed on them with an unnerving intelligence. The gaping maw opened, revealing rows of teeth that glistened in the faint light. Light it! Bill shouted. Logan didn't hesitate. He struck a match against his boot and touched it to the fuse. The flame raced along the rope, sputtering in the rain but holding fast. The explosion rocked the deck, a fiery bloom that sent shockwaves through the rig. The creature roared, a deafening guttural sound that sent shivers down every spine. It retreated, splashing back into the sea, but the victory was short-lived. The first breach. In the safe room, the remaining crew huddled, listening to the chaos outside. The explosion had bought them a reprieve, but the creature wasn't done. A thunderous crash echoed through the rig, followed by the sound of rushing water. It's breached the lower level. Carter's voice crackled over the radio. The storage bay's flooding. We can't stop it. Bill grabbed the mic. Get out of there now! Regroup at the safe room. Eliza and Carter bolted through the corridors, water rising fast around their ankles. The rig groaned like a dying animal, its metal frame shuddering under the relentless assault. As they reached the safe room door, Eliza glanced back. A shadow moved in the water, a long, sinuous shape gliding toward them with terrifying speed. Go! She screamed, shoving Carter inside before slamming the door shut. The heavy steel barrier held, but for how long, none of them knew. Desperation sets in. Back in the safe room, the crew regrouped, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. The explosions had slowed the creature, but it had adapted, attacking from below where they were most vulnerable. What now? Logan asked, his voice hoarse. It's not going to stop. Bill looked around at the battered, terrified faces. They had given everything, and it wasn't enough. But surrender wasn't an option. We have one last chance, he said. We lure it into the drill site and use the remaining fuel reserves to blow the whole rig. If we're lucky, it'll go down with us. And if we're not lucky, Eliza asked, then we give it one hell of a fight, Bill said, gripping the fire axe tightly. Chapter 4. The Final Gambit. The Atlas rig groaned under the relentless assault. Water sloshed against its lower levels, the metallic echoes reverberating like the heartbeat of a dying beast. Bill Hargrove stood in the middle of the safe room, the weight of their desperate plan pressing down on his shoulders. "This is it," Bill said, looking at the ragged crew. "We lure it into the drill site and we blow the reserves. That's our only shot." The room was silent, save for the pounding storm outside. No one questioned the plan. They were too exhausted, too terrified to argue. Eliza stepped forward, her eyes filled with grim determination. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "You and Carter are on bait duty," Bill said. "We need to get its attention, lead it into the drill site. Logan and I will set the charges." Carter's face went pale. "Bait? You mean out there?" "It's the only way," Bill said firmly. "We'll cover you as best we can. Once it's in position, you get back here fast." Carter swallowed hard but nodded. "Okay." Setting the trap. The rig's corridors were a maze of flickering lights and ankle-deep water. Bill and Logan worked quickly, hauling the remaining acetylene tanks to the drill site. The reserves were stored in a reinforced chamber, the heart of the rig's operations. If they could detonate them, the explosion would be massive enough to destroy the entire platform, and hopefully the creature along with it. "Think this'll even scratch that thing?" Logan asked, his hands shaking as he rigged a crude detonator. "It has to," Bill replied. "Otherwise, we're just buying time." Meanwhile, Eliza and Carter prepared to lure the creature. They stood on the main deck, the storm battering them with sheets of rain. Carter clutched a flare gun, his knuckles white around the grip. "How do we know it'll come?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. Eliza glanced at the churning water. "It's already here. Trust me." She lit a flare, the bright red light cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Carter followed suit, firing his flare into the waves. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the water erupted. The creature surged upward, its massive body breaking the surface. Its scales glistened in the light, water streaming off its ridged back. It let out a bone-chilling roar, its golden eyes locking onto them. "Run!" Eliza shouted, grabbing Carter's arm. They bolted toward the drill site, the creature crashing against the rig's legs as it pursued them. The entire platform shuddered with each impact, metal groaning under the strain. The chase. Eliza and Carter tore through the corridors, the creature's guttural growls echoing behind them. It was inside the rig now, its long body slithering through flooded passages. Pipes burst as it thrashed against the walls, steam hissing into the air. "This way!" Eliza shouted, dragging Carter toward the drill site. She could feel the creature closing in, its presence a tangible weight pressing against her. Ahead, Bill and Logan had just finished rigging the charges. Bill waved them forward, urgency written across his face. "Move, move!" he yelled. Eliza and Carter slid into the chamber just as the creature appeared. It filled the corridor, its massive head snapping at the air. The glow of the detonator's blinking light reflected in its predatory eyes. "It's in position!" Eliza cried. Bill didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand down on the detonator, the charges primed to blow. "Everyone out now!" The explosion. The crew sprinted toward the upper deck, the rig shaking violently as the creature thrashed against the walls. Behind them, the countdown ticked away, the faint beeping drowned out by the cacophony of destruction. They barely made it to the lifeboats when the explosion ripped through the rig. A blinding flash of light illuminated the storm as a massive fireball erupted from the drill site. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet, and a deafening roar filled the air. For a moment, everything was chaos. Debris rained down, the rig collapsing into the churning sea. The creature's agonized roar echoed through the storm, a haunting sound that sent shivers down their spines. Aftermath. The lifeboats bobbed on the turbulent waves, the crew huddled together in silence. Bill stared at the burning wreckage, his mind racing. Had they succeeded? Was the creature dead? "Do you think it's over?" Logan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Eliza didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the water, where a dark shape moved beneath the surface. It was smaller now, fragmented, but unmistakably alive. "It's retreating," she said quietly. Bill clenched his fists. They had survived, but the thought of that thing still out there, lurking in the depths, filled him with dread. "We'll warn the authorities," he said. "They'll know what to do." But as the lifeboats drifted away from the wreckage, a new fear settled over the crew. The Atlas rig was gone, and with it, any proof of what had happened. In the cold, endless waters of the North Sea, the creature vanished into the deep, leaving only questions. and the uneasy certainty that it was not the last time humanity would disturb something better left buried. Chapter 5. Into the Abyss. The fire on the horizon was already fading, swallowed by the relentless storm. The lifeboats rocked violently on the churning waves, their tiny forms dwarfed by the vast, unfeeling North Sea. Bill Hargrove clung to the edge of the boat, his knuckles white against the cold metal. Around him, the surviving crew sat in silence, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. "No flares left?" Logan asked, his voice hoarse. "Used them all," Carter muttered, huddled under a soaked blanket. "No radio either. We're on our own." Bill stared out at the water, his thoughts a jumble of relief and dread. They had escaped the rig, they had survived, but the creature was still out there, and its presence lingered in the back of his mind like a shadow. "What do you think it was?" Eliza asked softly, breaking the silence. Bill didn't answer. He couldn't. He replayed the events in his mind. The monstrous roar, the golden eyes, the impossible size of the thing. It wasn't just an animal. It was something older, something the world wasn't supposed to see. Whispers in the dark. The crew drifted through the night, their boat a fragile speck in the vast ocean. The storm had eased, but the sea remained restless, its waves slapping against the hull like an impatient hand. "I can still hear it," Carter said suddenly, his voice barely audible. Eliza turned to him, her brows furrowed. "What?" The sound," Carter whispered. "That growl. It's like it's still out there." "You're imagining things," Logan snapped, but his own eyes darted nervously to the water. Bill tightened his grip on the edge of the boat, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He wanted to dismiss Carter's words, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sea seemed too quiet now, its depths too dark. The phantom shadow. As dawn approached, the storm clouds thinned and pale light broke through the gloom. The survivors strained their eyes for any sign of rescue, a ship, a plane, anything, but the horizon remained empty. Then Eliza saw it. A ripple in the water, far off but moving steadily toward them. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Bill," she whispered. He followed her gaze, his heart sinking. At first, it was just a shadow, indistinct and blending with the waves. But as it drew closer, its size became unmistakable. It was enormous, far larger than their lifeboat, and it moved with an eerie grace. "It's back," Carter whimpered. "Hold steady," Bill ordered, though his voice trembled. He reached for the fire axe they had salvaged, knowing it would be useless against something so vast. The shadow circled them, its movements slow and deliberate. It didn't attack, but its presence was overwhelming, a silent reminder of their helplessness. "What does it want?" Logan asked, his voice cracking. Eliza shook her head. "Maybe it's curious. Maybe it's waiting." "For what?" Carter asked, his voice rising in panic. No one had an answer. The depths reclaimed their own. The shadow lingered for hours, never coming closer but never drifting away. The crew sat in terrified silence, their eyes glued to the dark shape beneath the waves. As the sun climbed higher, the shadow began to retreat, its massive form sinking slowly into the depths. "It's leaving," Eliza said, though her voice lacked relief. Bill watched it go, his chest tight with unease. The creature's departure felt deliberate, almost calculated, as if it had decided to spare them, for now. "What do we do now?" Logan asked. "We wait for rescue," Bill said, "and when they find us, we tell them the truth." Eliza's lips tightened. "Do you really think anyone will believe us?" Bill didn't answer. He stared at the water, now calm and unbroken, as if nothing had ever happened. The Atlas rig was gone, their equipment destroyed, and the creature had vanished without a trace. As the hours passed, the crew began to relax, their exhaustion overtaking their fear. But Bill remained on edge, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that the creature wasn't just a fluke, but a warning. Epilogue: The Silent Sea. Weeks later, in a sterile boardroom far from the North Sea, a team of corporate executives reviewed the incident report. The official story was simple. A catastrophic explosion had destroyed the rig, likely caused by a gas pocket. There were no mentions of strange seismic readings, no references to the creature. The survivors had signed non-disclosure agreements, their accounts buried under legal threats and corporate spin. But in the quiet moments, when the wind howled and the waves crashed against distant shores, those who had been there knew the truth. The North Sea held secrets, ancient and terrible, and humanity had only begun to scratch the surface. Far beneath the waves, in the cold, lightless depths, the creature stirred. It was alive, waiting, and the sound of distant drilling echoed faintly through its domain.